Okay, well, we are live from welcome to a Joseon era Starbucks here in Daegu, South Korea. I am the creative Contessa, and today we are doing my quintessential, improvised in every way medieval sewing party. So today I'm dressed in a 15th century kirtle, but I'm dressed like I just got out of bed. So my hair is down. You all are seeing something you don't often get to see in these videos. My hair uncoiffed and just kind of down. Now, this is kind of an experimental format, so I've got the headset on. If it's too loud and you all can't hear me, then we'll maybe do a soundless sewing party where you just watch me sew. But in the meanwhile, we're going to give it a try. I'm out here just enjoying this beautiful day, a beautiful hot summer day from inside of a beautiful traditional Korean environment. So let me just give you a look at the inside of this Starbucks. Isn't this amazing? You would never believe this is a Starbucks, right? Yeah, it's it's pretty. It's a pretty lovely space. So it's a good place for me to come and sew and kind of be around people because otherwise these days I spend a lot of my time just kind of alone. So I need some company. So yeah, what is everyone working on today? I'm going to apologize in advance if you're on Twitch, on Facebook. Unfortunately, I can't see the live chat in those two platforms. For whatever reason, the technology is mocking me, but I can see the live chat from YouTube, actually. So today I am working on the thing that should be covering my head. I'm working on a new kerchief. So I'm working on the rectangle for that. And basically, I'm just stab stitching all the way around the edges, all the way around to just make one big rectangle, one big linen rectangle. And this is the part that will actually go over the front of my head like this. And then there'll be a draping part in the back that will be attached to that. And if you see me wearing the white thing over my head in any of my given videos, that's what this is. It's a 15th century winged kerchief. Some people call it a Flemish kerchief because they think it appears in a lot of Flemish art from this era. So yeah, that's what I'm working on because I'm teaching a workshop on this. This coming weekend is the number 3 in the series of this workshop, and part of the workshop is doing homework in between. So I need to get this piece ready in time for our final session of the workshop. And if you're interested in learning how to make one of these kerchiefs, let me know. Keep an eye on my website, thecreativecontessa.com, because that's where I generally end up putting such things. Ooh, a 2 map of the world, but in the SCA. That's pretty cool. So, John, what's your medium? Are you still in the sketching phase? What are your plans for the finished product? Are you going like handmade paper or vellum or yeah? What's your materials there? I am a map lover. If there's a map on a wall and I walk by it, I will stop and look at the map. Doesn't matter what it's a map of. Subway map, map of the world, map of Narnia. Doesn't matter. If it's a map, I will look at it. I love maps. Big map fan, and I especially love medieval maps because they're such amazing artistry. They're beautiful, and especially the maps are so impressive from the 15th century. They're the ability to capture accurately, the coastlines of Europe, for instance. Mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing from the 15th century. And then the itinerary map, ancient Roman itinerary maps are also super fascinating. This long strip that's like literally just a list of cities that you're going to hit and the distances between cities uh, to get from Rome to somewhere else in the Roman Empire, under the understanding that basically you're going from city to city. So as long as you go to this city and then from that city I guess you ask for directions to the next city. Of course, with the Roman roads, it was much easier because there were mile markers and there were signs pointing to cities, right? The Roman road system is amazing, not just because of the way in which the roads themselves were built, but all of the amenities along the way to allow you to track your progress. Yeah. So welcome if you're joining from wherever you are in the world. I'm actually currently in Daegu, South Korea. And I am, believe it or not, just behind me This is a Starbucks that is built in a Joseon, the style of a Joseon nobleman's house. Gotta love it. Love Korea so much. So you're at the sketching and design stage. Start with paint on paper, then paint on leather, then block print on cloth. Oh, interesting. Block printing. So I guess that means, John, if you're going to be block printing, then you're going to have to carve. I assume you're going to be carving your blocks by hand then, or were you going to use some kind of laser, like one of these modern programs for laser cutting your blocks? That's pretty impressive. Yeah, people who don't understand the process of block printing or stamping, for instance, don't appreciate the level of work that goes into just designing your block. First you have to come up with your concept sketch, then you have to refine it, then you have to transfer it onto a block, then you have to carve the block, and you have to carve it in such a way that the parts that are in relief that actually protrude up are the ones that are making lines. Of course, it's funny if you think about block printing in the Middle Ages, or engravings, right? They are like the mass production tool of the Middle Ages to mass produce art. Even though a lot of the engravings were hand painted afterwards, but the actual line drawing itself was a piece of mass production, and yet it still involved a crap ton of handwork. Yeah, welcome to those just joining us. I am the creative Contessa, and I am here in Daegu, South Korea, at what is unfortunately probably a rather loud sounding Starbucks that looks like a 16th century Joseon era nobleman's home. So one of the reasons I love coming here. The atmosphere is the architecture is stunning. And I'm enjoying a very not medieval beverage today, matcha latte. Actually, this is something people sometimes criticize me for going to a Starbucks in Korea, but let me tell you something about Starbucks pretty much anywhere in the world, especially Asia, they localize. So the Starbucks in Korea have local Korean tea. They have good quality organic tea grown here, like 2 hours away from Daegu. They have beverages that are only available in Korea, like this matcha latte. They have pastries that are local to the local cuisine. So you can actually get castella bread, which is a very interesting melting pot dessert that made its way to Korea via Japan from Portugal in the 16th century. So, going to a Starbucks in Korea will be not like this, not at all like going to a Starbucks in the US. I mean, they have coffee, they do. I mean, they do have espresso, latte macchiato, or whatever, but they've got a lot of really localized specialty items. Yeah, so I am just making my way through this rectangle of linen, and I will tell you, everyone, rectangles are so challenging. They really are. They are not the easiest thing to work with. To actually get a perfect rectangle, and then to line that rectangle in another rectangle, and to get everything to be nice and square and right angles, it's actually not as easy as you think it would be. It's easier definitely to do curved shapes than to do perfectly rectilinear shapes. I also brought with me today an interesting book to read if I wanted to take a break from sewing and do some reading. And depending on how the sound quality was, I thought I might do some reading to you, dear fellow creative viewer. Letters of the Queens of England. And this is not just the Tudor queens. In fact, it's barely Tudor queens. Most of the book, in fact, the Tudor queens don't start until, let me see, here. I guess Elizabeth of York kind of counts as a Tudor queen. Yeah, so this much of the book is Tudor queens, this much of the book is other queens. So it's not just the usual letters from Anne Boleyn, letters from Queen Mary, right? It's actually some much lesser known queens of England, and it's their actual correspondence. And it gives you an opportunity to actually hear their voice, to see the things that they cared about, that they wrote about, how they wrote about them. And each section of this book, Letters of the Queens of England, also includes a history about each queen, so that you can understand the context of these letters, and not just read their words, but get a deeper understanding of why those words may have been written. So, yeah. Letters of the Queens of England for the win. So if you all would like me to do some reading to you, I will be happy to read to you a letter or two. However, I understand that because of the noise in here, it might not be the ideal situation for reading. But that being said, I've had many requests from you for me to do a medieval story time live stream, and so I'm going to start that. I've got to just look at my schedule and get it on the calendar. At least once a week, I will have a scheduled and maybe sometimes an unscheduled story time with the creative Contessa, and I will read. I will read to you aloud in my voice, either chronicles from the era, sort of salacious, gossipy, like original court gossip well, not the original language, because most of you wouldn't understand, say, 15th century French, but at least in the translation of the original language, and or maybe stories from the Decameron. I would, of course, curate stories that won't get my channel canceled because of inappropriate or very bigoted and misogynist content. The mores have changed these days. What can you say? Boccaccio's tales, back in the 14th century were folk tales. The mores were different. What was considered an acceptable way to treat your fellow human, whether Jewish or a woman, was different. So we'll just avoid the stories that would be probably over the top. Like, I probably will not read any of the ones that have egregious wife beating in them, for instance. God, I hope that doesn't get my channel canceled, just me even saying those words aloud. So yeah, if you are interested in story time with the Creative Contessa, medieval story time with the Creative Contessa, just let me know in either the live chat, or if you're watching this as a recording, in the comments under the video. But I think I'm going to do it anyway. But it would be nice to know if that's something that interests you all. So this morning, my time, I went live with two of my colleagues and friends, and we discussed, we held forth randomly about War of the Roses related topics, specifically because we were talking about the War of the Roses convention that is going to be held in Lithicum, Baltimore next February. I have actually been hired to lead dancing there in the Friday evening icebreaker dancing. And there's going to be many very world-renowned speakers there lecturing, discussing War of the Roses era figures and tactics and history. Also, because it's sort of an all things Plantagenet convention, there will be an expert on Eleanor of Aquitaine there. There will be classes on 15th century tailoring. So it will be a pretty good time all around, and a good chance to meet your fellow 15th century geeks. So if you're interested in that, check out waroftheroses.com. And it's on, also there's a Facebook page, there's an Instagram page. I don't think there's a TikTok yet for it. So for some reason, if any of you have been putting comments in the live chat, my last one was John saying sketching design stage. So unfortunately, my live chat has just decided I don't need to see what you all are saying. For that, I apologize. Technology, what can we say, right? So for those who are interested in the stitch I'm using for this to finish these, to join these edges and also make them nice and flat, this is a stab stitch. Let's see if we can actually show. So this is a stab stitch, and it's basically a species of running stitch, but instead of taking your needle this way, like a wave, you actually take your needle straight up and down at right angles so that the stitches are very, very, very vertical through your fabric. And this makes a very, very strong edge and a very, very neat edge. Keeps things really neatly joined. So that is what I'm doing. Sorry, the screen is, yep, I guess I don't get to see your lovely comments. I'm sorry, everyone. It will eventually, at some point, the live chat will actually participate again. Yeah, so for those just joining, welcome. I'm the Creative Contessa, and welcome to my impromptu medieval sewing party here in a Joseon era style Starbucks. So I come here specifically because I love the architecture. It's a little louder here than I might like, so I Okay, now is there sound? Is it back yet? It should be. I'm connected to the Bluetooth headset. And I turned off this stupid gimbal. Anyone? Anyone? Can you hear me? I feel like a ghost, like I'm talking into the void and no one is hearing me. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm I don't understand why it's doing this. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Am I am I am I connected again? Yay. Okay. No longer screaming into the void. Thank you all for your patience. I appreciate you all for waiting for that painful process. So I didn't realize that my gimbal had connected to the Bluetooth also in my phone. And I think that just confused everything. Hey, Pancake, it's good to see you again. Okay, everyone. So let me see. What was the last cohesive thing you all heard me say? I was talking about starch and the benefits of starch. So, yeah, I know the background noise is a bit heavy. It is. It's just people here are, I guess they're drunk on coffee. Like I don't know. I don't know why they're so excited and loud. But yeah. What was the last thing you all heard me say? I was holding forth about starch and the benefits of starching your medieval garments, your linen garments. And I was on a roll. I was giving all kinds of good information, and I don't know if anyone actually heard it. Yeah, I know these people, man. I have to say, one of the things I love about Koreans is that they are boisterous and excited and just full of a kind of life joy. Yeah, Carl, oh, so fantastic to see you. It's been a little while. Well, maybe not that long. I'm sorry, time is traveling strangely for me right now. So in some ways, the days fly by, and other times it seems like an eternity between live streams. So yeah, it's actually ironically not many people here, but the ones who are here, they are good at making noise. I joined it, no audio, so no clue. Thank you, Villa. I appreciate that. Um, okay, well, I'm just going to restart my lecture on starching. I'm sorry for those who heard it. So one of the things I'm going to be doing in the workshop this weekend on making a 15th century winged toy, one of the final pieces I think we're going to do is starching. And the reason that we starch things, as I learned once I started looking into medieval starching practices, is that you don't starch things only to make them stiff. That's actually not the whole point. Yes, it's nice to have maybe crisp lines, to have things not wrinkle. Starching also prevents wrinkling. And in linen, that, as we all know, linen wrinkles if you just look at it angrily, or even if you look at it at all. So starching prevents that, but it also prevents things from the dirt and the grime from actually embedding itself into the fabric, because the dirt and the grime bonds with the starch. And then when you wash the garment and the starch washes out because it's water soluble, then it takes the dirt and the grime with it. So it prevents the dirt and the grime from actually working into the garment, which means that your whites stay white longer and wash more easily. So that's one of the reasons to starch your garments. Number two is that the starch apparently also retards infestation by unwanted insects such as lice. So good night, handsome. So there's multiple reasons to starch your garments, not just because you want your things to be perfect and crisp. And also Tamara, thank you so much for that compliment on my kirtle. Yeah, this is I'm sitting here today with my hair completely down, just like some kind of wanton hedge-born woman, but that's mostly because I'm out and about on town today. So I'm this is how I generally, if I have a morning where I have to gown up or medieval up, then I just stay that way for the day because I get tired of changing clothes. So this is how I just came out and about, and let me just show you guys the view from my little spot right here. Isn't this beautiful? Yeah, this is one of my favorite places to come just because of the beauty of the architecture. Right. Yeah. So would the starch affect the wicking process of linen and sweat? I have not noticed a difference. in the wicking properties. Um, I have I haven't starched my smock. I've only starched my veils, and my kerchiefs, but I haven't noticed a difference in the wicking. But that would be an interesting kind of scientific endeavor to see if it does impact it. If the starch somehow binds the linen fibers down and retards that wicking process. That's a good question, actually, Willa. I have not yet noticed that myself. Now, so would I, maybe that's the next experiment I need to do after I launder this smock and get it actually clean. I'm not going to. It's pretty grimy around the edges where it comes into intense contact with my skin. But maybe after I get it laundered up properly, I'll try doing a light starching and see what that does for it. I'd also be interested to see if that keeps the cuffs and the collar from developing as much grind as they tend to when I really wear it out and about. Because the thing about modern cities is they're dirty in a different way than medieval cities were. Because here in a modern city, we have all the exhaust from the cars that builds up as particulate matter on the road, and then when the cars drive through it, then it kicks up and it's floating in the air, and then that combines with the oils from your skin, with any sweat you may exude, with any lotions, moisturizers, or sunblock on your skin, and then that turns into this kind of nasty little paint that will then stain your garments. Because what is oil paint other than pigments and oil, which is particulate matter, and skin oil apparently is enough to make a kind of horrifyingly sort of natural paint that then stains your garments. Anyway, so starching even my smocks might actually help slow down the disgustification process. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to test. You're absolutely right. Peppermint, nice to see you. Welcome back. Welcome back. So where is everyone these days? And I mean, I don't want your address, just kind of like your continent, maybe, country, if you feel that comfortable. I'm in Daegu, South Korea. And it is now sometime past 5 o'clock here. And I am enjoying a very not medieval matcha latte, iced. But the matcha is from Jeju. Yeah, this is Jeju matcha. So it's a tea that's actually grown here in South Korea. Very high quality. Let's see, what else do I have going on? Oh, I've started my new, the first Burgundian gown that I've made in 12 years. And that's the dress, the layer that would go over top of this, the quintessential Burgundian medieval princess layer, right, with the turned-back collar, normally with a tall mitre on top, a long train, big border around the bottom. And I'm going to be making it in the same style. I'm using the same pattern that I made for my red silk Burgundian. You've seen pictures, footage and pictures of me in that all over my channel and social media. If you've been following me in any degree, it's my beautiful red silk taffeta one. And the new one is going to be made in that style, but I'm taking into account the mistakes I made when I patterned it the first time, by which I mean to say I did not pattern it over top of a kirtle. I patterned it just over top of a shirt. And of course, that means when it goes on over top of the kirtle, it doesn't fit together quite right. It's a little too small because it didn't take into account the thickness of this kirtle, and it doesn't quite fit in the arm side, right? So it actually pushes this up like this instead of letting it sit there and therefore be invisible. So what I have to do when I put that gown on is I actually have to pin the kirtle to the collar of the gown so that it doesn't slip up like this and render itself obvious. So I'm reworking the pattern. I've cut out a mock-up of just the bodice last night, and I added here, and I added some on the sides and in the front and in the center seam. And I'm going to baste that together tonight because I'm already dressed in the thing over which I need to try it on. And I'm going to see if the additions are enough to actually allow the gown to now sit properly over this arm's eye. And if it comes down to it, I might need to play with the arm's eye of the burgundian gown to get it to fit. But the goal is that the gown should fit perfectly and comfortably over the kirtle. Yeah. Pepperminty, I love it. Planet Earth, good for you. Matcha latte, yeah. Matcha latte, unsweetened, only unsweetened. So I'm really enjoying the full flavor of the matcha with the creamy effect of the milk. Obviously, milk has lactose, but no like sugar. So it's just sweet enough for me with the milk in it. Yeah, quite nice. Ooh, Kent, nice. You live right between Haver Castle, Leeds Castle, and a few other castles. That is so cool. We were just in Leeds. Well, we were in we were in Leeds back in October. Yeah, for a couple of days before embarking on Queen Mary from Southampton. We enjoyed the Royal Armory. Was great. Just walking around Leeds was nice. We also went up to York. Took the train over to York. Walked around at nighttime. It's really nice. The nice thing about, cities like York at nighttime is that the modern additions or the modern buildings kind of blend in. Australia and not on the coast. John, not on the coast? Are there people who don't live on the coast? Fascinating. Yeah, I think everyone imagines that Australia is just like there's a ring of habitation right on the coast, and then everything in the middle is, a few original peoples, but otherwise, pretty barren. My stepfather was actually offered a job, though. He's a construction engineer, and he was offered a job on a project that was not on the coast either. And my mother told him, oh, not only no, but hell no. We did have some Yorkshire tea. We did. We went to we definitely went out and enjoyed ourselves. Yeah, we had a nice afternoon tea at the local hotel. Because we couldn't find a tea shop. This was weird. We couldn't find a proper tea shop in Leeds. And I don't know if that was because our Google foo was weak or what. But, I also think we were a little late. So I think maybe the hotel was the only thing still offering tea at that hour. We were a touch too late for afternoon tea, but they were still offering it, so we managed to just squeak in. Yeah, I know. Leeds Castle. No, you're right. Oh, you're right. That's right. Leeds Castle isn't. Yeah, why is Leeds Castle not in Leeds? Actually, you know what? I'm going to bet is so Villa, does the Leeds that's in South, near London, does that have a by name like Leeds on Thames or something like that? And I wonder, because usually that's how you distinguish different towns and villages of the same name in Europe. You add their geographical attribute of a by name. Like Frankfurt on Main versus Frankfurt on the Oder, or to distinguish between the great Frankfurt city and the small town that's in eastern Germany. So is anyone else working on things? John is working on a map, which is so cool. I just love that. He's such a map person. Oh, I wanted to share with you. I shared this in this morning's live stream. No, it's just called Leeds. I guess it's too small to get its own by name. So this morning I was talking about a couple of things, but I mentioned that I have been trawling through the household accounts of John Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, as he would become in the second half of the 15th century, and I found an entry for disguisings. Okay, so payment for the materials for making, for a disguising that happened at Twelfth Night. And a disguising is the 15th century English word for a mask, M-A-S-Q-U-E. And a mask is not a masquerade ball, just to make that clear. A mask was a costumed performance. In the 15th century, they were usually performed by the aristocrats, by the nobility, by the members of the noble or royal retinue. And the interesting thing about the materials for this disguising, as I read down this rather long list, actually, it was all paper and gold foil and silver foil and glue. So what this tells me, I suspect that this is a list of materials for making 15th century masks, like face masks and costumes, like proper theatrical costumes, as we understand that word modernly. And what's interesting about it is there was the only textile related thing in this list, as I recall, was thread. Everything else was paper and foil and glue. So that really tells us that even in the 15th century, the idea of theatrical costume as something that is not intended to last past the performance is a very real one. So if you're looking to make an authentic 15th century mask or costume pieces to turn yourself into the goddess Zeus or Jupiter, because of course they wouldn't have used the Greek name in the 15th century, or into, you know, the allegory of love or something like that, then you should be looking at 15th century paper, which is of course rag paper, so it's kind of a little hardier than your average modern paper is. And glue and silver and gold foil and paint, and then those are the raw materials. And see, I'm pretty certain it was probably, there's probably a paper mache, kind of paper mache style process, because that technique is described, I believe, in Cimino Cennini's book, Handbook of the Artisan. So yeah, that was, I thought that was a really interesting window into how theatrical, what we would consider theatrical costumes were made in the 15th century. So let's see, what else are people working on? I'm patching a quilt that I've been putting off for a while because that poor quilt is just hemorrhaging. Just doing practical stuff for now. You know what? After I basically collect all of my practical repairs up into a pile, and then like I pick a day, and that's my repair day, and all I do is focus on repairs. So probably expect one of my medieval sewing parties coming up to be another repair time sewing party, where I will work on and show you how to affect any number of random repairs on garments, because I live in my medieval garments. When I wear them, I treat them like clothes, right? They do not get special consideration. I do not treat them delicately. I wear them like I'm going about my real life in them. And so, you know, things tear, things wear away, things get dirty. And so I've developed many techniques over the years for repairing my garments. So there will probably be a medieval repair party coming up here in the not so distant future. Nartitique says, I need to find a project, get me back into Fantasyland for a little break. Yeah, I mean, so right. Yeah, I mean, repairs, it's good to do repairs. You know, it's good to stay on top of that stuff. On the other hand, sometimes it's nice to just create a fun, pretty thing, right? So I've got a couple of fun, pretty things on the docket these days. I'm trying to learn tablet weaving and ankle weaving. Well, tablet weaving. I've actually never done ankle weaving, but I've done tablet weaving, and tablet weaving is actually pretty straightforward. For the basic pattern, right? There's more complex patterns, and then you need to do different things. And of course, you can take it to the next level by brocading in a pattern over top of your tablet woven pattern. There's definitely ways you can make it more complicated, but at its essential level, tablet weaving is pretty simple. It's just, for me, the thing that frustrates me about tablet weaving is the setup. It takes a long time to set up. And we don't even have to do half of the steps that they had to do just to get to thread that you could use in the 15th century, right? But, you know, the warping process just takes time, and yeah, you have to have. Now, what I have seen to make tablet weaving less time invasive is if you get one of those replicas of a 15th century tablet weaving loom. And the 15th century ones are actually, I don't have enough space here, they're basically two posts, like tall posts, like waist high posts, to a board on the bottom. And then the posts will actually turn them, and so that you can actually put lots and lots and lots of warp on it. And then as you work through, you just turn the posts to to release the unwoven thread on one side, and to curl up to wrap up the woven trim on the other side. So there's at Penzic, for those of you who are familiar with Penzic, there is a merchant who actually makes replicas of the 15th century, 14th, 15th century style tablet weaving loom, and they're great because they can break down into flat pack, right, where you just have two uprights and and two centerpieces, or two connectors, one on the bottom and one in between, to create stability, and then it just literally packs into four pieces. And there's this little crank thing, the crank that actually allows you to do that. That's there too. But yeah, if you go to Penzic, oh god, I forget. For some reason, the name Rowan is sticking in my head. Rowan Furniture or something like that. When I go to Penzic this year, I will be live streaming, and if he's there, I promise I will take you by to show you his carpentry items. And I will take you through the merchant area, the market area, and show you all of my favorite merchants, the ones I shop at when I need something, and who produce quality items, with good materials and all that. It's setting up that's getting hard for me. Not many, really? So that you haven't been able to find, not that it's hard for you. I'm sorry, Villa. The thing that I'm shocked about is that there aren't many tutorials about setting up for tablet weaving. So there aren't tutorials that show you the warping process? Really? Interesting. Okay. I'll have to see. So it's been a long time since I've done tablet weaving, but I'll have to see if I remember it well enough to be able to show you, to maybe do a quick and dirty tutorial on setting up tablet weaving. That kind of surprises me, actually, but I believe you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm tablet weaving iPads. Very cool. I love it. I mean, what a better world than to be able to tablet weave an iPad. That's fantastic. So the projects I have on, other than obviously this kerchief that I'm working on right now, like I said, I've started working on my new burgundian gown and discussed the things I'll be changing there. I'm also working on a new reta, which is that little net coif caul-like thing that you see on Florentine ladies in the second half of the 15th century. It's not the same as the one you see on the Neapolitan and Milanese ladies. It's more fitted and less obvious. And I'm doing that with finger loop braiding. And I'll probably do a project video on that. And I've had requests for a workshop on how to make that reta. So if you're interested in making the Florentine reta, keep your eye on the creativecontessa.com. It will be a pay what you can format. So in the, when you go to checkout in the tip section, you just enter the amount of money that is comfortable for your financial situation, and we'll call that good. The workshop will include teaching we'll do the basic finger loop braids that you're going to need for it. And then we will go through step by step, actually setting up the finger loop braiding and actually tacking it together, the stitches you'll need. It will be a pretty easy project overall. So it's a good project for beginners to get in on, both beginner finger loop braiders and beginner hand sewists, because it will all be by hand. There'll be nothing by machine. Yeah. Let's see. I'm disabled and on benefits. I can't afford a lot, so it's cheap secondhand or bodge job work around. Totally get it, man. Villa, so I might not be disabled and I might not be on benefits. Our income situation currently is real limited, but that's a temporary thing, hopefully. But that being said, I was raised to be thrifty. I was raised to thrift shop. I was raised to look for bargains. I was raised to look for deals. I don't believe in paying full price for anything unless it comes to artisans, but I can afford that, right? Well, normally I can. And so I'm happy to support the artisans, and I totally understand that not everyone is on that budget. And so if you're interested, for those who don't know, I actually have a series of videos on my YouTube channel called Medieval on the Cheap. And so you can actually, I talk about what the original medieval objects look like, and then I show you medievaloid cheapo similars, as I call them, that I found by thrift shopping that are good equivalents. And I tell you where I found them, how to look for them, and this way it gives you a visual reference for the original medieval items, so that when you go thrift shopping, you can look for things that look very, very similar. So yeah, I have a whole series on that because I believe that living history And medieval recreation should be accessible to everyone. And I believe that authenticity is a spectrum and a journey, and that everyone should get to choose their own level of authenticity, and no one should denigrate them for not being museum perfect, right? So if you're interested in medievaling on the cheap, check out my YouTube channel. If you look up maybe medieval on the cheap or shopping, those search terms should probably bring up the videos. I learned wire weaving in my last SCA class, and I was shocked it was easy. I'm allergic to wool. Oh, man. Oh, sorry about that. So those crafts have eluded me, but I can't wait to get into wire weaving. Trims for a small. Yeah, nice. Nice. Yeah, wire weaving is awesome. It is remarkable how easy it is. I learned to do wire weaving at an event, SCA event in the Netherlands, actually, also. That was at a 17th century powder house. What a great site that was. And they taught Viking wire weaving. And the funny thing, they call it Viking wire weaving, but it's really just wire weaving. And it seems to be a technique that continues, at least visually, it looks the same, at least up until the end of the 15th century. And in the 16th century, if you look at necklaces, if you look at the chain, you'll look, it's not necessarily chain, it's wire weaving. Let's see. Yeah, there's about the weaving part, but not the setup. Wow. Nothing about tangling, how best to tie to post, what color thread to use. Well, that seems like a really big oversight. Wow, I didn't realize that there were no good tutorials on that, on the beginner basic setup. You know, I guess for me, I aim most of my videos at my tutorials anyway, at beginners, under the understanding that they don't know anything. Like my finger loop braiding tutorial might seem overly simplified for people who know how to finger loop braid, but you know, I just kind of automatically assume people going into it aren't. I'd rather make it more accessible than less accessible, but you know, that's just how I do things. If I wanted to be medieval on the cheap, I would wear a potato sack and sit in a muddy puddle. I mean, no, because potatoes aren't medieval, so definitely you wouldn't use a potato sack if you wanted to do medieval on the cheap. Yeah, and also, I don't know why everyone assumes that the Middle Ages was muddy. I mean, I guess it was, but you know, it was only muddy when it rained. Otherwise, things were dry. I mean, the reality is that, you know, poor people in the Middle Ages actually first off, the levels of poverty were much lower than they were in the like Reformation and Industrial Revolution period. But, you know, the number of bequests for clothing for the poor in wills is pretty high, and especially because what wealthy people would do with merchants and even the nobility, they would actually pay the royalty as well. They would actually bequeath a certain amount of money for garments, or a certain number of garments and they literally say for the poor of the parish or something like that. That would be then made for them, and the point was that these people would be mourners, and they would pray for the soul of the deceased to shorten their time in purgatory, and in exchange for their prayers they would get a suit of clothes. And of course there were hospitals, you know, charitable institutions where the poor could go and be given, not like the horrible workhouses of the Victorian era, but where they could be cared for, where they could get food, where they could get clothing. We're also, secondhand markets were absolutely a going concern in Europe. There's a great picture of a secondhand market in Bologna that depicts the secondhand market is interesting because it shows all the things that are secondhand, right? There's secondhand furniture, secondhand armor, secondhand weapons, secondhand clothing, secondhand household goods, and it shows a man trying on a pourpoint, what some people might call a cote hardie, but it's not. It's a pourpoint. And the depiction, the illustration, I think maybe even be 1413, either 1403 or 1413. but the garment he's trying on is very clearly out of date. It's old-fashioned by that point. We're talking of the style of Charles de Blois from the 1360s. And this gentleman has his clothes are ragged. He's got like these ragged chausses on. The feet are worn out. And he's trying on this pourpoint with this grand assiette, and very much in the style and tailoring of the second half of the 14th century, which, you know, in Italy by the early 15th century, they've moved on from that. They're moving on from that. And so it's very interesting to see that the artist intentionally chose to depict that style of garment to show you this is a secondhand garment. This is not new off, you know, fresh off the rack or fresh from the tailor. And this man is trying it on over top of his raggedy clothes. But the garment he's trying on, and I mean raggedy not as a judgment, they are literally raggedy. They are in rags. You know, with tears and worn off edges and everything. And he's trying this thing on, and it's very clear that he's probably going to make a purchase. That's why he's trying it on. So it's a very interesting illustration. It's a secondhand market in Bologna, and I don't remember from what work it's from. No, the evidence for medieval clothing for the poor is not a big T-shirt at all. Really, I'm telling you, it's not. The poor were generally wearing the hand-me-downs of their noble betters. So they weren't just wearing a big T-shirt. They were wearing things that were, you know, basically of the fashion of that from probably a couple of decades ago. If you actually go and start looking at depictions of the poor, you're going to see it's not just a big T-shirt. That is not the evidence at all, especially not with these bequeathments. Even in the Irish, 15th century Irish wills, the same thing. Large amounts of bequests for the poor for clothing, very specific, linen shirts and wool coats, right? And with buttons and everything in one of the cases that I found specifically for the poor. So they really weren't, it was a different, poverty was handled differently and treated differently in the Middle Ages. It just was. They had access to different kinds of services. The evidence does not speak to big, loose, baggy T-shirts, and definitely not to sitting in mud puddles. Wait, Wagu just woke me up to take him inside and carry him to his food. God. Wait, say what now, Carl? Are you kidding me? Do you mean the Ayatollah? Which leader? Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm going back to my medieval stuff. Sorry, the world is like literally on fire. I'd rather go back to a time when, you know, if the world was on fire, it's because we were setting fire to villages on purpose. not because we're just being irresponsible and letting it burn. So bad. Okay, that's terrible, Carl. Darn. Okay, so I'm now finished. All right, we're down at this end. Okay, I'm almost done with my stab stitches. I just have this last little bit and this edge to do, and then I'm going to remove my basting stitches. Now, for those of you who do hand sewing, then you know what I'm talking about, but maybe you don't know that instead of using pins, once you should do basting stitches. So when you're hand sewing something, your first step is to pin the thing together. Well, maybe it's not the first step, but when you get to the point of actually sewing and you pin it together, then you use basting stitches to hold it in place and you remove the pins. Pucci! Han, welcome! Good to see you. Do they mean like paintings of field hands who work in smock and hose? Hold on a minute. Wait, I missed some stuff. Do they mean like the pictures of field hands? So, oh, right. Yeah. So, you know, what when you see, so remember, field hands, they're not poor. People think peasants are poor. Peasants in the Middle Ages are not poor. Peasant just means someone literally who works on a farm. Right, paysan, the country person. It literally comes from the French term that means country person, right? So these are people who live and work the country. And so being a peasant does not automatically mean you're poor. And in many cases, it means you're not poor. It means as long as the harvest is good, you're good. And the peasant life is actually not just drudgery and food. That's a myth. That's a myth of the Middle Ages. I guess Philip and I are going to have to talk about that in one of our myth busting series. Peasant did not equal poor in the medieval world, in the medieval, right? Yeah. So when you see peasants depicted and they're out in the field wearing nothing but chausses and a smock, or even nothing but a smock, in the men's case or in the ladies' case, they're often wearing a kirtle and a smock, right? That's because they're out there in the hot sun working, and what that person is depicting, he's showing you this is how the peasants dress when it gets hot, and they're out in the sun. But that's not because they couldn't afford more clothing. They're out in the sun working the field, getting dirty, and so they're minimizing the number of clothes they're going to have to wash, and they're also staying cool while out there laboring away in the heat of the day, because depending on the period in question, summers get rather hot in Europe. Up until the 14th century, the evidence points to Europe. I believe I read that they had 2 to 3 harvests a year, not just one, which means it has to be warm enough, early enough, and late enough to allow that to happen. Yeah. Oh, Nardi. So you're talking about geometric construction. Got it. Okay. So yeah, totally. I mean, it's not like a big T-shirt though. So this seems to be a myth that goes around. Geometric construction does not equal T-shirt, not in the later Middle Ages. Geometric construction actually means complex. So they actually build triangles into the lower half to add on men's tunics, by the way, to give them flare, to give them shape, to cause the skirts to widen. So they were not just big T-shirts. Geometric construction is actually super complicated. And as far as we can tell, because secondhand clothes being handed down to members of the less affluent, and or new clothes actually being made for the extreme poor as part of these bequests, right? So their garments were probably not as simple as we'd like to think they were. There's no evidence for that. The evidence points to the contrary. But yeah, geometric construction seems to be a going concern until the 15th century, and then the geometric construction continues for the undergarment. So that's the smock, for the white linen layer against the skin. But it seems that they've moved away from geometric construction for the overgarments, and they've moved into much more sophisticated styles of tailoring. And because it's the poor who are inheriting the clothes of their so-called betters, I'm going to say probably by the 15th century, they're definitely not that way anymore. Now, the Middle Ages is not a monolith. So if you're talking earlier periods, that's different. But there's an interesting book called Poverty in the Middle Ages, and it makes a good case. It's a study. They did all this economic analysis based on the records that are available. And poverty, the poor have not always been with us, at least not in numbers, as far as we can tell. And the poverty seems to go hand in hand with the rising urbanization that happens across the Middle Ages. It's a very interesting subject. Working to not get it designated as a cooling zone. Yeah, so churches, especially Gothic churches, stone churches, are much better at naturally maintaining a good steady temperature. They're just naturally a cool place to be in the summer, right? Sorry, I'm catching up to the comments. Oh, great. Well, say what now? Carl, have we really officially declared war on Iran? We did what now? Okay, I can't switch away from the screen because otherwise it will detect the live stream. Is this true? Did we actually officially declare war on Iran? That would be, if we did, then this might be World War III, ladies and gentlemen. God damn. So many shoes found in the Thames. Yeah, Tamara, the Thames finds are amazing. For those who aren't familiar, Museum of London has published a whole series of books. One of them is Shoes and Patents, and it is all about the Thames finds. The amount of fantastic medieval remnants that we have found in the Thames are yeah, pretty amazing and wonderful for those of us trying to recreate medieval material culture. Yeah, seriously, this is not. This is. Oh, Carl, did you just take the vibe of my stream down with the harsh light of reality? Jesus Christ. I really did seriously. Can anyone confirm? I have, if I switch away on my phone, it will disconnect the live stream basically, so I can't go and check. That would be really unfortunate. Back to the happy thought of the Thames, where yeah, as I think who was it who said that? Tomorrow said loads of hand-me-down evidence in that. Yeah, the Thames is. It's remarkable how many worn out objects ended up, whether intentionally or accidentally, in the mud of the Thames River. But we appreciate that, those of us who like to recreate medieval material culture. And you know what's funny? In the medieval living history world, because the Thames finds are kind of unique, actually, in their quantity and their state of preservation, unique for Europe, in fact. No one, like the Italians will actually reference, Italian reenactors will reference the Museum of London books for a lot of their items because they don't have the same rich, detailed, preserved material record that the Thames has just wonderfully provided for us. So, you know, I check out the things that the Italian reenactors and the Spanish reenactors and the French reenactors are publishing. And writing about on their own groups and, you know, the research for their projects. And very often I see the Museum of London books referenced as a source, a resource for their recreation. And it's because, like I said, they haven't yet found a river. they haven't found the Italian Thames, right? Yeah. Yeah, so it's yeah, the Thames is fantastic. The Thames is fantastic. Sorry, someone just wanted to take my picture. He's approved. I ran attack plans, but not made the final decision, apparently. Damn it. Okay, well, everyone, I guess some of you heard it here first. Thanks to Carl sharing this possibly freaking world-changing news. Jesus Christ. I just, wow. Oh my God. You know, it's weird. So this is, it's a little surreal. I'm sitting here in this beautiful space, this traditional Joseon style Korean space. It's actually a Starbucks for those who hadn't heard that yet. And everyone is sitting here laughing and having a good time. And the news that might literally mean the beginning of World War III doesn't seem to have touched here, even though it should, because there's a lot of U.S. military here. No, it's okay. I'm coming back. I'm pulling it back. It's okay. You know, it's okay. I can come back. I'm good at compartmentalizing. Honestly, I've seen this coming. I've seen the writing on the wall for a couple of years now because of my spouse being an active duty officer in the U.S. Army until very, very recently, and being aware of geopolitics as they are. I would like to say this surprises me, but it doesn't. It just kind of surprises me that it's today, I guess. So yeah, that is. Let's back to the Thames and the mud and the trash, the medieval trash that ended up in it. Yeah, that is a wonderful thing about a lot of the Thames finds is that they show signs of repair. The shoes show signs of clobbering, which I don't mean like beating someone up. Clobbering is the process of repairing shoes, of adding patches to it. And so you can actually, we know how to authentically repair medieval shoes because we have the repairs that are extant. We know how to authentically repair a lot of linen medieval garments because the scraps that have survived, that have been handed down to us, actually show signs of repairs. So we can absolutely document the men, what kind of mends and repairs they made. And you know what's fascinating about the majority of the mending that I have seen in my own and on the extant garments I've examined, um, not necessarily in person. I haven't gotten to examine many things in person, but you know, in high def pictures from catalogs and whatnot, is that they were not medieval people were not on the whole particularly neat about their repairs necessarily. They weren't going for symmetry, they weren't going for perfection. They were going for, will it do the job? Will it patch the hole? Will it hold the line for more wearing? That seemed to have been a bigger priority than being pretty, which is, you know, contrary to what most modern people would imagine a repair. Most modern people want an invisible repair. They don't want it to be obvious. They want it to be as magically invisible as possible. And at least on the garments that have survived, that doesn't seem to be the case. You know, when garments get retailored to fit a new body, like the tailoring, it's not subtle. You can really look at it and see it, like the golden gown of Queen Margaret, absolutely refitted for another smaller body, and it's very obvious that it was. So yeah, that is an interesting thing I've learned by looking at extant medieval garments, is that the mores, the base mores surrounding perfection, were very different, very different. Let's see. British rivers are ironically very oxygen poor, making them perfect for preservation. It's amazing. Yeah, right. I mean, how weird is that? Like, it's just the right conditions for that. It's akin to how some of you were asking. Let me see. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was scrolling back through the messages to see if I missed anything. It's akin to how some of you were asking me, because I did a tour of the Daegu National Museum where they have extant historical Korean garments, and I was talking about wet mummies. And for some of you, apparently that was a new concept, and apparently for some of my dear wonderful followers, it was a horrifying concept. But then I got asked about the mummification process and was it intentional? And so that made me go do quite a bit of research into it. And the answer is no. Apparently, in Korea and in other parts of Asia, the historical entombment process in the sort of from the 16th century onward, the historical entombment process created the perfect anaerobic conditions for preserving the body in a moist state. And so one of the reasons for that, one of the reasons for those conditions, was that the practice was to bury the deceased with lots and lots of their garments. And so many garments squeezed into this stone sarcophagus made it an oxygen poor environment. And then that combined with the stone sarcophagus, and then it's sealed by this very water resistant clay, just made this perfect, and it's put in the ground, which is cool. It just made for this perfect combination of conditions to preserve the bodies very, very well, and the garments as well. So yeah, it's funny how these accidents can happen, right? Whereas other entombment methods have not been so effective, but apparently in the Joseon era, and I guess in Qing and they studied some other places, Vietnam and somewhere else in this study. It's very interesting. Let's see. Tamara, you made a lovely pair of boots from the patterns. You mean the patterns in the Shoes and Patents by the Museum of London? That's a very good book. So if you're interested in making medieval shoes, Shoes and Patents is indeed a very good book from the Museum of London. You can usually find them these days. I think you can go to the Museum of London website maybe and buy them. I have also found them on Aid Books. I boycotted Amazon a long time ago for their completely unethical and vampiric-like business practices. But Barnes and Noble, I think you might be able to get it there as well. Depending, check Oxfam. Oxfam also, for you, those of you in the UK. Oxfam also occasionally has on their online bookstore Museum of London books. Ask me how I know. So yeah, there's also the book Stepping Through Time, which isn't just English footwear then. It covers a much broader range of Europe and is a much bigger book. And it covers patents and it covers other kinds of, over footwear. Like I said, it definitely covers a bigger range of time. So Stepping Through Time is another excellent book, but that one is certainly more expensive than Shoes and Patents, and I think it's out of print, so you'd have to find a used copy somewhere. Yeah. Some of you know I have made several pairs of overshoes, Italian overshoes called pianelle. We've made 2 pair at this point, a really tall pair based on Beatrice d'Este's and another shorter, more practical pair based on a couple of different 15th century Italian illustrations. And mine are actually my P&L. These are the raised platform shoes. They have cork on the inside, and cork is the best, most comfortable material for patent, ladies and gentlemen, because it's like walking on a cloud. It's got this nice light squish to it, firm enough to be, to be used. You can walk in it. You're not going to sink down, but it's comfortable enough to give some cushion. It's kind of like medieval Crocs. Cork shoes, medieval overshoes with cork interiors are like the medieval version of Crocs. Really, they're just like that. They feel so nice. Okay, I have just one last little bit to go, I believe. Yeah. Han, have you already finished I assume you've probably already finished your rectangle and your kerchief. Yeah, I'm almost done with mine. So we just got this last little bit to stab stitch and then we're done. So I've actually just finished pulling out, I think I've got all of the basting stitches, what I call thread glue. I've pulled that out. So now I just have to finish this last little patch and then we're good to go. Okay, here we go. I think this will be good. Boxton Man is one of my favorite corpses. Oh yeah, Boxton Man, the Boxton finds. Wow, I mean, the tunic and his hosen and his shoes and his hat, like that's just an amazing combination. Yeah, exactly. They have his whole outfit, and it's in such an amazing state of preservation. And the sophistication of the tailoring on the Boxton tunic is just lovely. It really is. It's gorgeous. I love the Boxton Man tunic. I've made the Boxton tunic multiple times. And it makes such a beautiful tunic. It really does with the skirts. And especially, you're supposed to, this is a period where you wear a belt around, men wear a belt around their waist, the proper waist, not the modern waist. And so the skirts are beautiful and hosen that just hug the man's nicely muscled legs so beautifully. And then when a man dances in the Boxton chausses with the Boxton tunic, thing of beauty, let me tell you. Really gorgeous. I love the Boxton tunic. It is such a beautiful garment. It really is. It just makes such a lovely thing. And you can't know that about a historic garment, an extant medieval garment, until you make a reproduction and see how it moves and flows on our living body. Because you see it in a case, this glass case, and it's pinned out. It's lifeless, literally. But then when you recreate a garment and you put it on a living human, a living body, and that living body then lives the way a medieval person would have in it, then you can really appreciate the complexity and elegance of medieval tailoring. I think not enough credit is given, especially in modern tailoring circles, to the sophistication of medieval tailoring techniques, many of which have actually been lost. And we're only rediscovering as we uncover more and more, corpses often, or as we open up walls and ceilings in historic structures from the Middle Ages and find that the insulation that was used was, the tatty remnants of garments. And then we can start to see just how really complex and sophisticated the science of taking a 2-dimensional shape and fitting it to a 3-dimensional body actually was, even in the Middle Ages. I'm thinking especially of the Langberg finds. They found a couple of bodices from gowns. And when they started looking at the way the grain was on the bodice, they realized that, it's not at all what they thought. Normally you would imagine that the grain, that's the weave, right? The weave of your fabric is the grain. And on a tabby weave, it's just, this way, perpendicular threads, right? On a twill weave, it's slightly different. It's a 2x2 thing. But so normally you would think, okay, the grain is going to be here on the bodice. It's going to line up with the body and line up with the torso, right? That's going to be the grain. And they started looking closely at the grain of this bodice piece, and they realized it wasn't that at all. The patterning, I know some of you have heard this before, but for those of you who haven't, I'm sharing it again. the patterning, the pattern on for this bodice, the way in which it was cut, it intentionally was cut on the extreme bias to take full advantage of this bias effect, whereby on the arm's eye has this strange teardrop shape. Like it looks like they've just cut out this weird teardrop shaped hole, and that's because the part of the teardrop is actually the shoulder seam is over here. I wish I could like make my fingers make magic lines for you. And then this part here folds down, and so all of that bias here becomes those organ pleats that you see in German gowns from the 15th century that are pleated, those pleats that come here in the front. So it turns out that you don't need to insert a separate set of pleats to achieve that. This tailoring does it entirely and creates those organ pleats from just the natural fall of the fold of the fabric and the bias that then causes it to be very three-dimensional. Just like, wow, mind blown. That is on my list of garments I want to recreate, by the way, just because of that fascinating tailoring. And I have some amazing Melton wool on the way. My condottiero, my agent in the United States, went shopping at the Pendleton Wool Mill. And they had a whole bunch of gorgeous Melton wool, which is like the satin version, the satin of wools, on sale for $17 US a yard. And they have them in some gorgeous, really nicely saturated medieval colors. So I have a whole bunch of different. I have like 5 different colors on its way, and I'm gonna use one of them to recreate this garment, this Langenberg dress. I'm gonna make myself just a whole 15th century German outfit, but specifically because I want to play with that tailoring. I want to experience that tailoring. Let's see. Let me just back up a little bit. Let me see. Okay, I think the boxing mantle is made to be worn asymmetrically too, based off of a little dart down one side. Very complex looking as big half circles go, right? I agree with you 100%. And actually, so the Boxton tunic is kind of, it's dated to like 14th century, right? And if you start looking, if you actually look at the representation, like early 14th century, if you look when the people are wearing cloaks in that era, you actually see they've got, like, this is where you start seeing the cloak that fastens over the shoulder and is open on one side, right? It's got the buttons on the shoulder. That's kind of like, it almost looks forward to that. No, I agree with you 100%. Hoopalands have been proven to be more tailored than people expected and still provoke debate. Oh yeah, twitchy, I know. The word, anytime someone just refers to a hoopaland as a circle dress, it makes me want to vomit. I mean, because, we don't have, there are a few, and I mean like 3 of which I'm aware, extant, what we think were hoopalands based on the amount of fabric, the descriptions, and the inventories, etc. Right, and they're all in the Czech Republic, as far as I know. And if you look at the tailoring, I mean, holy mother of God, the one of the hoopalands that they have from the crypts in Prague Castle is like 12 trapezoidal gores. Or 14 trapezoidal gores, a ridiculous number of trapezoidal gores. And then if you think about that, you think, oh yeah, that's going to have all that bias effect from all those edges, right? There's always going to be at least one edge. You can maybe manage to get one edge straight, but the other edge is going to have to be on the bias. And then when you start thinking about that, you're going to get this bias effect, and it's going to create a more rounded, more voluminous fold. People call them pleats, but pleat means fold. So it's going to create this natural pleat that's just going to automatically be more voluminous. Mind blown, right? And then you're no longer fighting to keep those pleats in place or create those pleats. They just make themselves, baby. And then all you have to do is put a belt on, or as we do know was definitely a practice, a twill band on the inside, sort of securing the spots where those folds will naturally happen, will just encourage them to stay a little neater, so that when you move around, they don't move so much, right? So yeah, exactly. Anytime someone says a hoopaland is a circle dress, I feel a little queasy. That's old costumer knowledge, right? That's old costumer myths. Now that we actually have found some extant ones and looked at how they're constructed, it ain't that. Yeah, yeah, Twitchy Witch, yeah, Pendleton. So, you know what? I am wishing that I had thought to announce that I was going, well, that my agent was going to Pendleton. Um, but if there's enough people who want, I can probably send him back for a small commission to cover the cost of fuel because it's like a 3 hour drive from where he's currently based one way. But yeah, $17 a meter. The sale ends June 30th, and this is really nice, made in America melt wool. So not made in China and then imported. The wool mill, the Pendleton wool mill, is in Oregon. It's a proper mill outlet. And the quality on this melt wool, it's real nice. It's almost doe skin nice. It's real nice. Okay, thank you for joining us, Peppermint. Appreciate you. Yeah, right. And the colors. So I expect a short coming out, and you can see the wools that we bought. So the short that I'm about to publish is going to be kind of a caveat emptor, buyer beware for fabric. And what I'm going to remind you of is that the color of your fabric in the store under those fluorescent lights, maybe LED, but either way, under those artificial lights, is not going to be the true color of your fabric when you get it out in the sunlight, in natural light. So, and I did this by having my condottiero take footage of the fabric folded up in the store on the cutting table, and then footage of it outside in the sunlight. And you can, the difference in colors is, oh my God, night and day. Once he got the fabric out and I saw the colors in the real sunlight, my jaw dropped because they were beautiful in the store, much more beautiful outside of the store. So yeah, there was black and red. And oh yes, the red, oh my God, the red was gorgeous. The red was Kermes red. Kermes red, absolutely. It's not actual Kermes, but it is that shade of red, so 100%. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Han. That's why you should try to cut a sample. Also, so if you're shopping in a perhaps not necessarily reputable fabric venue, then you're probably actually going to want to not immediately buy unless you have developed a feel where you can really tell if there's some kind of synthetic in your fiber. As Han says, as Twitchy says, you're going to want to maybe get a sample. And then what I do, and I really do this, guys, is I go outside and I light that baby on fire, and I see what it does, because especially if you know your fiber, you can do burn tests, and you can know exactly what's in it based on the results of the burn test. But then you can also see what the color actually looks like outside. Okay, yeah, DM me as you have my deets. Just reach out to me, Han. I'll ask my condottiero what was left after we raided their goods, and he can always call down and ask them what's left on the sale rack. Yeah. Yeah, so if you do not know whether your fabric merchant is reputable or not, I do recommend, getting them to give you a little sample and going outside and doing a burn test. Don't do the burn test in the fabric store. You're going to get arrested for attempted arson. But, go outside and do it. You should be probably okay, depending on your city. I guess also know your city's fire ordinances. Maybe go home and do your burn test. But either way, do a burn test. Korea thing. I heard that garments' names weren't gendered. They were called the same for men and women. Before there was more of a European influence there. Is that actually true? That is true for the most part. Yeah. So for instance, I'm thinking back to like there's certain garments that are not gendered no matter what. So like shirt is not gendered in English. Shirt is not gendered. So dogori is not gendered either. Dagyang is also not gendered, or Jangok is not gendered. Chima is gendered, but only from the perspective of the men aren't wearing chima. I'm trying to think about how to say this. I'm thinking about, there's also a language shift, a big language shift from in the terms used for clothing. So the terms used for clothing in the 15th century and earlier are based on Chinese characters, and I haven't quite gotten around to learning all of those terms yet. I'm still learning the old words. And so there's a change in the language from using the older Chinese words, which came to Korea in the Tang Dynasty during the Shilla era, when Shilla was a kingdom of Tang. And later Shilla, they started adopting Tang Dynasty style clothing. And I think my theory anyway is that's when the Chinese words came into Korean in that era, so the end of the first millennium-ish, so like the 7th, 8th century. Is I think when those terms came into Korea, and they stuck around for a long time. And then in the 16th century, we start seeing, as far as I can tell in the document, a shift in the terms that are used full stop. So it's not so much that the garments are gendered or not gendered, it's that there's certain kinds of garments that are only worn by men or women. But there's more of an overlap of general garments that are worn by both, like paji, pants, men and women all wear them. Jogori, men and women all wear them. I'm not certain about the jeonsam, which is the undershirt for women. I've been reading about women's clothing a lot. I haven't followed up to see if that's also the term for the men's undershirt, the layer that's like right against your skin, the one that actually gets washed, the Korean smock, so to say. Yeah, so there are some garments that are gendered from the perspective of it's a kind of garment only worn by men or women, but less so. And there seems to be, especially in earlier Joseon anyway, there does seem to be more overlap of what men and women wearing the same garments. And there hasn't quite been the division, the differentiation seems to happen as the Joseon era moves onward. And the clothing differentiates more and more, because earlier, like in the Shilla era, the difference between men and women's clothing doesn't necessarily seem to be massive. Like the overgarment, what we would call a jogori in modern in Joseon and later Korean, is the same almost for men and women, for instance. So the differentiation seems to happen as time goes on, and it happens more and more, especially as the Joseon era progresses onward. But the underlayers like Kaji, everyone's wearing those. Boseon, everyone's wearing those. Did that answer your question? Let me see. What did I miss? Let's see. I hate you. Okay, I'm sorry, Twitchy. I've got to show your comment because just whatever. Gosh. Okay, there I can see it again. Let me unshow it. Okay. Okay. Oh gosh, I hate this screen so much. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to show your comments. It's just not letting me just look at them without highlighting them stupidly. Right. Okay. Part of working in such an old era is there's very little fabric that could be studied for my smoke truck, and in constructing it and making guesses that made it end up looking like a later garment. Yeah, Nardi, I'm sorry, I missed the era in which you're working. Are you working in the first millennium? In which case, yeah, what you have there in terms of extant garments, especially the base layers, is you've got like a piece of linen like this that's arrived on the back of a brooch, for instance. Although if you get into bog bodies, depending on where you are, you can find more better preserved garments from bogs, especially. Unless you're wearing veils and girdles, but that's about it. It makes a lot of sense. Tailoring is a continuity for one inserted goes into the skirt. Yeah. Nardi, I absolutely agree. You never knew the full truth until you really start building the garment. And then you start having to fill in blanks that aren't obvious if you just look at the garment. And, I think that's one of the things I really enjoy. It's why I'm more interested in medieval clothing than I am in later eras, because in later eras we have so many surviving garments that have been examined microscopically, literally, that the answers are there. There isn't a lot of room for, well, we don't know, so we have to fill in the blanks by experimentation and by creativity. So like in recreating medieval garments, there's more room for experimentation and exploration, and to discover potential realities through experimentation than there are in later eras. So that's probably one of the reasons I do enjoy medieval so much. Yeah, literally remnants on brooches. Yeah, I know. little piece like this big that was protected by the metal, creating a kind of magical environment that prevented it from rotting. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the the archaeological record can be very biased because for textiles, because plant fiber cellulose, it does not survive well in the ground or over time. It rots pretty easily and pretty quickly, which is great. It's super biodegradable, right? I mean, that's awesome for, not creating a bunch of toxic, bits in the environment. But for fashion historians, it's frustrating because if you look at just the archaeological record, you're going to get the impression that no one ever wore linen. Thankfully, in many eras, we have documentary evidence that tells us the contrary. But that's we have to remember that when we're looking at the archaeological record, that you have to take into consideration what kinds of materials will survive, what kinds of materials would have been allowed to be interred in the first place, rather than just getting reused and reused and reused and reused until they fell apart. Right. So there's these you have to, if you really want to get into understanding the history of fashion, you can't study just clothing. You really do have to study the whole context. And there's a lot of fashion historians who don't do that, or people who make historical clothing who are missing that key part. For me, it's key anyway. I mean, I get it for hobbyists, whatever. I'm not talking about your casual hobbyist. It's a hobby, but I'm talking about professional, right? Yeah. This is very specific for me, but medieval wear is also very non-gendered in several ways. That is not the case in many other cases later on. The techniques and cuts are still very unisex. Oh yeah, I mean, especially if you get into, like, if you go to the 12th century and you look at the high fashion garments in England and France, and you're like, okay, yeah, I see it. They're basically the same. In some cases, with men wearing bliots, with the really long sleeves and trains and fitted, right? Yeah, so and that's true, like I said, in the Sheila era before the Tang influence. Sheila and Goguryeo and Tegaya and Gaya and damn it, the other kingdom that was part of the three kingdoms. Its name just freaking flew out of my head. Anyway, yeah, clothing seemed to be more similar, much more unisex. Maybe with the difference being that women, or in the Sheila era, that women's dresses went all the way to the ground and men's robes only went like to their ankles or to their mid-calf or something like that, right? Vila says, I find there's a huge divide between historians and people who do living history, making stuff. At Hastings Castle, a historian was showing off a drop spindle, showing the stone and weird cuts into it, wondering what spiritual significance it had. Oh my God. Spirit, ritual archaeologists. Dear archaeologists, if you're out there listening to me, back away from religion. Like, yes, it could be an answer to why a thing looks a specific way, but could we please not make it the default answer as to why any particular artifact looks a specific way? Like, have you all heard my tale of the Neolithic village? I think it was in Orkney Island, or one of the Orkneys, or one of the Shetland. Up there, I'm pretty certain it was. But it might also have just been in Scotland. So there was this living history Neolithic village, and they rebuilt it. The summer they rebuilt it based on their understanding of Neolithic architecture, and they rebuilt it exactly as they had found in a variety of Neolithic villages from this era, exactly the way they found it. And one of the things they found in almost all of the Neolithic villages from that region in this era was that at the entrance, they thought was the entrance to the homes, to these round homes, there was a trough at the entrance, just in front of the entrance. And of course, what did they assume it was? Of cultic significance, of ritual significance. Obviously, this is a place where they made sacrifices and probably prayed to their gods. Who knows? That's what they thought. So they decided not to recreate that part. They didn't recreate the trough in front of the homes, because they thought it was like an altar place. Well, we don't, for some reason they decided that was unnecessary. So they lived there and worked there for the summer, exploring what they thought were Neolithic practices. And what they noticed is that over the summer, these troughs started developing. And what it turned out to be, when they eventually someone they realized what was happening, they started watching to see why these troughs were developed. None of them were digging them. They were just happening, and they paid attention. And so what they were doing was they were feeding their chickens. They were throwing scraps out for the chicken and food out for the chicken. They would throw them out the door. And the chickens would scratch, 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 and these troughs would develop. So what they learned, what they think they actually ended up learning, was that it wasn't religious significance, but it was just how they fed their chicken. So yeah, archaeologists, please back away from the religious explanation for everything because it's overwrought for certain. Right, exactly, Han. Yeah, how to tell me you have no experience with religion without saying it outright. Uh, yeah, yeah, I can't believe God. Yeah, so I started when I went to university. I picked a university that had a medieval studies program because I thought I want to major in medieval history, and I didn't realize at the time that there was a difference between living historians and historians, and that gap has narrowed drastically since then. I think there is an increasing collaboration between the living history community and the historian community, which is great. But it was my first seminar in the Crusades that made me realize I didn't want to study history like this in this boring, dry way, because it was the seminar in the Crusades, and one of the premier medievalists in America at the time was a professor at my university, and I actually told him that I did living history. He scoffed. I thought, oh, okay, then maybe this isn't the subject for me. Actually, that's when I switched to languages. But yeah, I think historians get bound up sometimes in great man history or great church history, right? And they forget that history is actually about people living their lives every day, not just about one battle and one treaty that happened on this date in this year. And that to really understand why that battle happened and why the treaty happened, you have to understand what shaped these people's daily lives all across society. And I think that's a part that a lot of academic historians are missing. Yeah, right. Yeah, the digging, right? The digging in that Neolithic village. So that's my cautionary tale about assuming that something has cultic significance when you dig it out of the ground. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I am done with my rectangle, everyone. Here we go. Look at that. Perfect rectangle. And again, let me show you how this will look. This will be the front. And my hair would actually be in braids, like pinned up and stuff. So, or taped up. So just don't worry about my slatternly hair, right? But there will be a piece going on the back here, and then that will wrap up around and tie at the top of my head, and then this will frame my face, and I can turn it back or I can have it forward. So that's what this is going to be. And Han, just so you know, I'm thinking about making starching like the final element of our workshop on the weekend. Let me know what you think about that. Once we've got it done, because I think we should be able to get it done in the actual class itself, because we only have to do the corners and then whip stitch this on, and I think that should leave us enough time for some starching. I'm thinking about that as being the final thing. Let me see, lack of religion in lice. Yeah, at least we hope there's a lack of lice. This is something that reenactors and living histories have really worked on in the UK. Academic historians, yeah, Twitchy. I've noticed there is an increasing collaboration, and that's great. And I've noticed it especially in the UK, which is fantastic. Yeah. Okay, pick up some starch. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then because I was thinking that could be like the nice. I can show you how I starched it. It doesn't take long. Like starching does not take long at all. At all. It's pretty fast. And then I can also guide you through the tips and tricks on successfully ironing your starched garment without scorching your starch and without it bonding to your garment, because it will try to bond with your iron. The starch will. Okay. Well, everyone, I think it's now less than 34 degrees, 32 degrees outside centigrade, or 92 degrees Fahrenheit for my Fahrenheit people. So I think I'm actually going to head home and get some dinner. But I just want to give you one last look at the beautiful space that I've gotten to occupy for our crafting session. I'm sorry, was it too loud with all the ambient noise? You know, I can't tell how loud it is for you guys. So just let me know. Otherwise, I might do some more because I really do like coming here on a hot afternoon. It's a really nice place. Give you just a look of the courtyard. This is my view. It's just so beautiful. Right, this beautiful space, you know, and in here especially, I just love that this is all handmade, right? Like most of these beams have been hand worked. You can't do this work by, you know, by machines in factories can't do it, right? You can use electric tools, but you have to have hands working the electric tools. Yeah, so if you liked having a crafting party, a medieval sewing party in this space, just let me know, and I can absolutely bring you back. If you thought the ambient noise and the, you know, vintage 30s and 40s jazz music was too much, then I will maybe refrain from doing a session here. Yeah. My bookshelves are now organized. Awesome, fantastic. Okay, no, that's totally cool. It did get a little loud in here, and this is with like actually a headset and a microphone. I might also try. You know what? I should have tried it, even though the my stomach has been failing me lately. I could have tried it. Let's okay. Okay, if you can guys just bear with me, We're gonna do a little sound experiment and we're gonna try different sounds, hopefully. Let me know if you can hear me, okay? All of you really, really lovely people who've been so dedicated for the session. Also, please hit that thumbs up. And if you haven't, then please subscribe. Yeah, and I will be doing more random sewing parties. Today's Thursday. I'll probably get another one in tomorrow, and then of course Saturday morning my time, Friday evening in the Americas, and middle of the night Europe. I will of course be doing my usual weekly medieval sewing party. Philip and I are not going to be doing our medieval myth busting thing this weekend because his lady wife wants to actually go out, God forbid, do things together with her husband when she's off from work. So we'll pick medieval myth busting up the next weekend. Yeah. Okay. So if you don't want to hang around while I just do a quick sound check, that's fine. But it would help if I had people to tell me whether they can hear the sound or not. So I'm going to turn off this headset. First off, I'm going to switch over to, let's see what happens if I switch to default. Okay. Hopefully it will just switch over. Okay. Oh, thank you, Virginia, for letting me know. Okay, can you all hear me now? Can you hear me? Am I audible? How do things sound? Or have things gone quiet? Appreciate that, Virginia. Thanks for that feedback. Just let me know. Can anyone hear me? Am I talking to myself like a ghost where no one is with me? I often feel like that when the sound goes out. I feel like one of those poor people in a horror movie where they're trapped in another dimension and no one can hear them or see them. Working. Okay. What is the quality of the sound? Is it better than when it was on the headset or not? Let me know. So this is just the internal, this is the camera microphone, nothing fancy or special. Okay. Is it better or different or the same as when I was just before, basically the whole session when I was on the headset? Of course, it is actually quiet in here now, relatively speaking. There's only a few people instead of a cacophonous group of Ajuma, the sort of, you know, postmenopausal class of Korean ladies who have no fucks to give and go out and socialize and enjoy life finally now that their children are grown up. Yeah, I'm just taking this was the silk thread that I used to baste my kerchief frontlet together, and of course I'm saved it, I pulled it out, and I'm rewinding it on my reproduction thread winder. Yeah. Different but about the same. Okay. It's better slightly. Okay, sounds about the same to me. Okay, let's try this now. I'm now going to switch over to my Lavelier. Okay, and for those of you who don't want to stay around for the sound check, I appreciate your support as always. But for those of you who are, I really doubly, trebly appreciate you all being here. Okay, so
Let me switch again. Let me see. Okay, did that switch over to ambient noise is probably cleaner, but difference is negligible. Okay. Okay, so now I have switched over to my Bluetooth mic, my Bluetooth lavalier. How does that sound, everyone? Is it same, different, better, worse? Yeah, just let me know, and I'll keep winding my thread. Oh, for those of you who weren't here earlier, you might not have heard me say that I'm going to start a weekly, maybe more if it's popular. Way worse? Okay. Okay, great. Got it. No, I appreciate that. Okay.
Good to know. Appreciate you all telling me that. Okay. Okay. Can you hear me still? Because we're back now on the worse wobbly. Got it. Fantastic. Great. Appreciate that. Okay. Good to know. We are now back on the internal microphone. Can you hear me now? That might sound better not in the cleavage. Yeah, possibly. Actually, you're right. Maybe, but yeah, maybe if I pin it over here. The problem is like the neckline on my kirtle is like so far all the way around from my mouth. Okay, that's good. Good to know. Good to know. Thank you, everyone. So I was saying I'm going to start a story time with the Contessa, where I will read not just either like medieval tales like from Boccaccio's Decameron, poems, that kind of thing, but also I'll read you things like letters from the Queens of England. We'll read chronicles, original primary source accounts of fun events, court gossip from the court of Burgundy that's been handed down to us in the original voices. So yeah, stay tuned for that. People have been asking me to do that. So I've decided I'm just going to go ahead and start a story time, medieval story time with the creative Contessa, and it will only be authentic, original, writings from the medieval era. So, and I'm probably mostly going to end up sticking to 14th and 15th century, just because that's sort of my area of interest. Probably I'm not going to give you a reading of Beowulf in Old English, because my Old English sounds like modern German. um, but I might actually do some readings in Chaucerian English for those who might be interested in hearing the proper Chaucer accent, as I have learned to do it. So I will definitely be doing that. Latest in streamer aesthetic mic necklace, right? Oh, God damn, yeah, seriously, Villa. Oh, thank you, Virginia. Yeah, this is what my hair looks like in nice humid conditions like this. This is what it does. It's happiest in humidity. So, yeah, today I'm giving you the slatternly, completely unkempt. Well, I did comb my hair, but hair not styled Contessa. So not many. You all should feel privileged. Not many people get to see my hair in combination with medieval clothing. Normally, it's just my damsels. Yeah. Oh, that was something else I wanted to mention. Sorry, there's one more thing I read that I wanted to share that was interesting. Again, I was reading the expense accounts of Lord John, the Duke, to become the Duke of Norfolk. And in the expense accounts, there's actually some appendices that are provided as contextual evidence that go with the household accounts. So it's actually a list from someone, one of his accountant, one of his seneschals or stewards, not seneschals, one of his stewards actually basically accounted the members of the household in a couple of different periods. And so it lists all the members of the household, starting with, the first one, interestingly, does not start with he who was Lord, John Lord Howard. It actually starts with his mother, and then it identifies him as her son, which I thought was fantastic. So that's the earliest one. But below that, it breaks down the members of the household by type, and it actually lists the gentlewomen and the gentlemen of his household. And so I actually suspect that the gentlewomen were the ladies, probably the what we would call the ladies in waiting, and the gentlemen were the valets. So I suspect this is, because it's not that many people, like 6 to 8 people in each category. So it's not like, all of these potential aristocrats who are part of their household. And so I really suspect those might be their retainers. Those So in which case, for English, it could be that, the Duchess would refer to her ladies as my gentlewomen, and the Duke could have referred to his valets as his gentlemen, right? That's a possibility. I have to chase that down a little bit further to verify my initial feeling on that. But that was an interesting little bit I read last night when I should probably have been sleeping instead. Yeah. Okay, well, everyone, I'm just packing up my things. I really appreciate you all for joining me today for this lovely uh, medieval sewing party. As always, you guys are great. I'm really loving the community we've built together. I really appreciate you all. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one. I need to finish my matcha latte. It's now more melt than matcha, but that's okay. And I hope to see you at least at the latest on my Friday night / Saturday morning medieval sewing party. And for those of you who are in my kerchief making workshop, then I'll really see you in that. And for those of you who would like some more direct interactive interaction than instead of just these live streams. For my patrons and my channel members, I have a Discord where we communicate, and we also do at least once a month, and I might start doing them more regularly now that I have more active people, active supporters. We will be doing like video sessions together where we do video sewing parties where we can really actually talk, see each other, show each other what we're doing, and you can get advice from me if you need it. So yeah, that's one of the perks I offer for my patrons and channel members. And I totally understand that not everyone is in a financial position to support me financially. Not expected. It's just something I thought I would mention. Okay, everyone. I'll see you later. You can't get rid of me that easily. And I wouldn't dream of it. Okay, everyone. I really appreciate you all. Thank you for getting creative with me today and for having such a lovely chat together. Until next time, guys, stay creative. Bye, everyone.